July 25th. We do have a quorum. I'm filling in for Mr. Joyce this evening. I get a motion to approve the previous meeting, minutes from the previous meeting. Thank you. Seconded by Legislator Lakakis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to local law L, agenda item number 1. Local law of the County of Albany, New York, regulating the use of polystyrene foam disposable food serviceware and requiring use of compostable recyclable food serviceware by food service establishments, Albany County, by amending local law 4 for 2013. Mr. Touchette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to request that the committee move on this and move it to the full legislature with a positive declaration. This is a common sense law that will take care of a portion of the polystyrene problems that we have. It's common sense because there's an exemption for not-for-profits, and there's a process for applying for waivers, and in the event that a waiver is denied, there's a process for the appeal of the waiver. It's got a lot of public support, and it's got a lot of legislative support. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Motion moved out favorably.
Do we have any other questions, Mr. Ward?
I had a question on the non-profit. I'm trying to find out. Would that refer to non-profits that are under contract with Albany County?
Well, this would refer to not-for-profits that are doing fundraising that's incidental to their general purpose.
All
So-
non-for-profits.
Pardon me?
All non-for-profits, not just
Yes.
non-for-profits that contract with the county.
That's correct, yes.
Well, I don't think it read that way. It said for an event, that's why I wanted to refer to the exact language, but I can't find it in this copy.
Can you find it for us, Mr. Touchet?
Not much.
What section are you referring to, Sean?
I'm trying to find it on this copy. I was reading it on the website.
Okay.
Section 6 of the waivers.
Yeah, it's on
Is it
the second page, about a third of the way down, food service establishments, except for not-for-profit organizations that sell food as fundraising events incidental to its primary purpose.
That's correct. Okay, so it's under definitions, food service establishment. What are we going to do about all these non-profits that are under contract with Albany County that pay them a per person? Let's look at our...
Like the congregate meals and home delivered meals?
Meal programs.
I think that,
That will raise their cost. Is Albany County going to pay the difference?
I think that's, we should if we have to, but the waiver provision, I think, deals with that. If there's that would cause the not-for-profit a financial hardship, and the waiver cannot be unreasonably denied. And if it is denied, then there should be, or there will be an appeal process for that. But I think for not just the not-for-profits, but if there's actual county agencies that use this, and for some of those, for Meals on Wheels, that may be the most appropriate way to deliver home meals. So I think that should be, the waiver should be granted in those cases.
But it's still up to the Department of Health to grant that if they so choose. So why
Yes,
don't we
but
just-
it
if that's our intent, why don't we do that?
can't be unreasonably denied. And if it is denied, then there's an appeal process.
What is the appeal process for? Is that, Mr. Touchet?
That is
Section 6.
section 6.
So here it is.
The compliance with specific provisions would cause undue financial hardship or other factors exist which would render compliance unreasonable, such as home-delivered meals, the jail perhaps. So the next section says, such waivers shall not be unreasonably denied. And the Department of Health shall establish an appeal process to be used in the event an application for waiver is denied.
So that appeal process would apply to also private sector?
Yes.
Your small mom and pop on the corner that's struggling to pay their electric bill every month?
That's correct.
How, so do we have unreasonably denied? What's the definition of that? Yes.
Well, I would, my definition would be if there's a reasonable cause for the waiver, which is either a financial hardship, so if mom and pop place finds that this would cause them a financial hardship, that would be the reason to grant the waiver, and it could not be unreasonably denied.
It says, Mr. Touche, it says that the Department of Health shall establish an appeal process. Has there been a financial impact statement? It's not with our materials today, but has there been one established relating to the county?
No.
And why hasn't there been one established?
There's no additional cost.
Well, there must be a cost.
Well, there's no additional.
Mr. DeMalo, is
We already
because
have county employees
The
in that area.
the Department of Health must oversee this according to this legislation, as well as establish an appeal review process, which would
We
require,
have people on staff to do that.
well, they must be doing something else too, shouldn't they?
There's no cost
To
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 this.
Mr. Ward's point, and the question you just raised, they're members of the minority caucus, they're interested in this very subject because of the fact that there's a direct impact on the budget because the county funds all these congregate meal sites and Meals on Wheels. So because this does not automatically exclude those entities, there's going to be a financial impact for those entities, which means there's a financial impact to the county. An
Well,
appeal
the
process
county
is just
so
that, it's an appeal process. It doesn't
Well,
mean
they
it's
have
going to
a waiver.
happen.
They can apply for a waiver.
But it doesn't mean it has to be granted.
Excuse
me.
Mr. Ward's point, if you are looking to exempt them, then the document can be modified to exempt them right up front.
Well, once you start exempting, it's a slippery slope. We can exempt them, then why not exempt the
Well-
mom and pop corner store
But-
or any other guy that comes in down the street that...
Well, they're the people I'm trying to protect here, the ones that
Yeah.
are having a hard time
Sean, we
paying
did
their
the same
bills.
thing in smoking bill. We passed the smoking bill, we had waivers there for all the bars and restaurants, we're gonna have,
Here,
that we're gonna
I
have
voted-
hardships and this and
I
that.
voted for every single smoking bill
Yeah,
that's
oh
been
yeah, but I'm just saying, we
passed
had the same
It's just is
process.
different. And my personal opinion is, I agree that styrofoam has an adverse effect on the environment, but I also believe that it should be a statewide initiative. All right, absent that, we've got to protect, I can't put a business in my district, right on the border of Rensselaer County and Saratoga County, in jeopardy when somebody can go right across either bridge and have an advantage
Sean,
against our
if you have-
businesses.
If you have a business is that marginal,
willing to
where
be
the
a
food service ware that he buys is gonna put him out of business, I don't think that business is gonna be around much longer anyway.
Well, I'm gonna tell you that we do have businesses that have.
You're
that type
talking
of
pennies,
margin.
pennies.
We're not as fortunate in the high volume area as you are, Gary. My district's.
I know the business.
I
I don't know
know
what
too.
experience you have in that business, but I was in it for 40 years. And I can tell you that the cost per item is pennies. And if there's someone who is marginable, to think that by not providing food service where to go, most of them charge now, all the big people charge, is ludicrous. That business is gonna be gone anyway. The food service business is not gonna put them out. This isn't gonna do it. There's a waiver for
I think
that
it's
process.
compounded when you start adding sick days on people and all
Well,
other
we're talking about
mandates.
food service
Gentlemen,
ware right now.
No, I'm talking about the compounded effect on small business of everything that we do here.
We'll have another debate on sick days.
Well, we will.
Well, gentlemen, and points well taken, Mr. Ward and Mr. Demalowitz. Mr. Touche, I believe, has a response, and Mrs. Willingham has a question. So
Okay.
would you like to respond to that, Mr.
Yes,
Touche?
yes, I would. in the village of Ravenna, there's a local, newly established pizza place. And I know the owner well. I spoke to her a year and a half ago about styrofoam. She did not want regulations like that put forth because she said it's going to cost me money. The last time I got wings there, they came in a compostable container. So I think that a lot of people are going that way, and obviously those aren't costing her a whole lot more money, or she wouldn't have made that change.
My other issue with this bill is that we're taking care of less than 5% of all styrofoam. I mean, if we really want to make an impact, why don't we go after all styrofoam? Because packaging is 95% of the problem. And we had an issue where we went out and looked at a recycling component for styrofoam that I thought would be beneficial to start up in Albany County, and it was voted down by this body. And that's democracy, that's fine.
Well, you know the reason why it was voted down, because it was
Because
tied
of
to DART,
politics.
and DART
No,
wanted
it was not tied to
All
DART.
right, let's.
Somebody tied it.
Mr.
to
Demonowitz,
DART.
Mr. Demonowitz,
I-
let's not go into
Organization was
DART,
funded by DART.
because this is not a discussion about it. Mrs. Williams had a question patiently waiting.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have to ask the attorneys just, can somebody please explain to me what's the difference between a not-for-profit and a non-profit?
Sure. So colloquially, people use both terms to describe a 501c3 organization that's organized under the federal law. The technically correct term, I believe, is a not-for-profit. People use nonprofit colloquially to say the same thing, but the technically correct term is a not-for-profit, under 501c3.
Oh, so, yeah, okay.
It's
Somewhat glibly to expand on that, and I think Mr. Ward's touching upon this, in small business, we have a joke, there's not-for-profit, then our businesses are non-profit, okay? Because we're joking about how difficult it is to turn a profit in this environment. And I'd like to add my own input to some of the things that Mr. Ward has brought up, which is, I don't think that styrofoam containers by themselves are particularly a financial burden or even a regulatory burden that by themselves will make small business too difficult to operate. But added as part of a death of 1,000 cuts, if you'll excuse the phrase, it becomes cumbersome. And it is my opinion as well, echoing Mr. Ward's opinion, that this is a statewide initiative that would be much fairer to all the businesses in the capital region as opposed to just those located in Albany County. And the point was brought up, if you're located in Cohoes or Troy or Green Island or Waterville, you can walk over the bridge and buy a styrofoam container at Stewart's or wherever and bring it back to Cohoes, 150 feet. So while it's very clear that the environmental stewardship aspect of this is admirable, this is not necessarily, in many people's opinion, I'm one of them, within the purview of the county legislature to solve, particularly given the fact that the county legislature voted down an initiative that I supported, which was to begin recycling styrofoam. And I know that there's been objections raised because there were called into question the corporate sponsorship, in which, to clear the air, no one who went to see that and no one who owned that facility had anything to do with the Dark Corporation, nor ever mentioned them. But that's just an aside. In any event, whether or
That's
not,
where the funding came for the 50,000 for the grant.
That notwithstanding,
That was an aside.
that was a side conversation, to be clear, okay, which had nothing to
Those are the people who
with the-
fund that institute.
Right, so anyway, that bill was, by the way, for clarification for this committee, that bill was simply directing the executive to look into the idea.
Well, the
of
legislature
it.
spoke on that bill already, so
Right.
it's a moot point.
Right, well, but it was brought up, so now it can be clarified, right?
And the
Mr.
reason why it
Development?
was voted down by the legislature is because it was funded by DART.
But it wasn't
It's not
funding that we were
funded by
voting on.
You didn't read the bill.
Right, it wasn't funding,
Part
and
of the
it wasn't
grant
dark.
was included, the red grant, that you weren't gonna get the grant if you didn't have a program for food service square.
So are we?
So, in
That's
any
a
event,
fact. Can't deny that.
It wasn't in the bill.
so in any event, I did have another question for the sponsor, Mr. Touche. It does say, under food service establishment, that not-for-profit organizations that occasionally, parenthetically, sell food as fundraising events incidental. What about giving away? There's no language in here for the missions, for the charitable.
They're nonprofits, are they not?
Right, but this says that sell food as fundraising. But I'm talking about organizations that give food away, okay? For example, the City Mission, right? So I'd like to see something that addresses that. In addition to that, going back to the financial impact upon the budget, not only is there an impact upon county agencies in terms of programs that we fund, but also in terms of the health department, in terms of enforcement, the appeal process, administration, tracking, et cetera. Not only that, but the punitive and penalty side. So this should have some kind of financial impact statement prior to going to the floor. Regardless of whether some people think it's negligible and that people at the health department have nothing to do, I don't agree with that. I think they do have lots to do. I think the people are busy.
I don't think it has an impact. I don't think it, was it $5,000?
So I don't think the mission, outside of holiday events like Thanksgiving or something, they're not giving food away, they're feeding people at the mission.
And
Right,
that must
that's what I'm
be
talking about.
permitted by the Albany
Not
County
selling.
Department of Health. They get inspected by the Department of Health, so they
They
would
do.
fall under the food service establishment definition in this particular.
Right, and so my concern is you should, in my opinion, you should be, if you're exempting not-for-profits, you should be also identifying those that are charitable organizations that are giving food to the homeless or needy, not selling. This indicates selling, okay, as fundraising, which could be an activity, I'm not suggesting it isn't. So there's no language that does tribute to that. We have no financial
Listen,
impact.
I work for Equinox at Thanksgiving. We give away food. We are a food service establishment, which means that the County Department of Health has to come. They come many times during the 2-week period that we're cooking. That means the beginning of the sentence. So I would
you
think
think
if I worked for
that's law?
Equinox, I would be covered under that. If I wanted to apply to get a styrofoam exemption, I would apply for a styrofoam exemption based on that sentence. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
But just
So the
as-
nonprofit exemption that occasionally sells food is, we're suggesting that because they don't, well, I'm not
Excuse me,
sure.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify that the word occasionally is in brackets, consistent with the rules of the legislature regarding adds and deletes on different versions of legislation. The only reason that the brackets are included in this version is that this was language that the sponsor had previously asked at various meetings to have that word omitted. The reading of the sentence, because that word occasionally is just, once again, included because it's been deleted. For the record, it's actually exempt for nonprofit organizations that sell food at fundraising events incidental to its primary purpose.
Pause before the
Okay.
public hearing.
So the point that you're clarifying was whether or not they sell food or give food away. So, under the waivers, it was brought up, and I would bring up again the exemption for organizations, that are funded by Albany County, or a financial impact on those organizations would be appropriate, as well as any cost therein for the health department
I
to.
think that's appropriate for the finance committee, not the health committee.
Well, if no
Health committee's
financial impact statement exists, then we're good work here. Arnis, you have something?
The most telling example in this case is that this legislation was previously provided and has gone through the legislature, and there was a financial impact statement which specifically addressed the charitable organizations, which is why the minority caucus members are asking for that analysis, which seems to be missing as part of this package in this instance.
So why has that been left out, Mr. Touche, from the previous version of this bill, which seems to be identical?
Oh,
Nearly.
it's not identical.
Well, in terms of its aim, it is. Sorry, maybe not the verbiage.
In terms of the
Did you make a motion?
the approach to a problem, it's similar, but there are significant changes.
But if you had the data from the previous bill, why is it left out as a financial impact?
Inexperience. This is the first bill that I introduced.
Okay. So could we get that for the next meeting?
Well, there's a motion to move this out favorably
Okay.
on the floor.
Well, do you have
Let's
anything else?
act on that before we go further.
I just wanted to say that I hear a lot of your issues and you're making some very good points. However, I still think it's the right thing to do. It's a big, huge problem. The only way that it's ever going to get solved is if somebody steps up and solves it. I don't know about you, but that's why I ran for office, so that I could impact my environment favorably, my community favorably, and I think, no, it's not going to solve all the styrofoam problems. And we're not going to argue about the other bigger styrofoam problem right now, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this small 5%, it's still 5% of the volume of the waste stream, and I think it's a simple way, and as a person who has been in food service on and off for many years, sometimes it's just a matter of having people think about it. I go to Suffolk County all the time where they charge 5 cents for the bags in the supermarket now. And, many times they just hand me a bag and I don't even think about it. But when they say to me, do you want a bag? And then I have to pay 5 cents for it, I say, okay, no, I don't have 4 things, I don't need a bag. But I think it brings the issue into focus for people. And sometimes, as you know, the things that we do at the county level helps the state to do the right thing, because it really should be a state level thing. For me, I'd second the motion to move it forward.
Okay, Mrs. Blankenship.
In listening to, the different opinions of my colleagues here, I do agree with you, Lynn, that I do believe that because these different types of issues are being brought to the forefront, that it is a worthwhile issue to take up and to do something with. I don't see any real problem with the way this is written. You do have the enforcing agency, and then, it also talks about the fines and how it's going to be taken care of. And I'm satisfied now, I know the difference between not-for-profit and non-profit. It's really the same thing. But just as Mr. Touche has said, that even with the small business that he had spoken to early on, they changed the way in which they do business on their own. So the difference in the type of material that is being used by establishments, I believe that more and more dining establishments understand that this is something that is just the way of the future. And they're changing on their own. So I support this, and I'll second the motion.
Mr. Touche, and one comment to Mrs. Willingham's observations is that's precisely why I disagree with why I'm against this, but I think the market is changing it on its own. And I think that the role of government is not to tell the marketplace how to behave when it can do it on its own. There's been other legislation like this where vendors have opted out and others will follow slowly. But under the waiver section, is financial hardship the only criteria for a waiver? And I bring this up because I've spoken to
He's new too.
I've spoken to other businesses when this came around the first time, and a lot of them said, hey, look, we have a question about quality of product on a takeaway basis. For example, thermal quality, okay, cold, hot, what have you. And I think this is legitimate. This isn't an object story. I bring this up because it is a concern for those folks. So if a person came to you and said, hey, listen, I specialize in ice cream, styrofoam is the only thing that keeps this going. So is that a criteria that might, be applicable as a waiver?
Well, as I mentioned a little while ago, it says the other criteria for a waiver is other factors exist which would render compliance unreasonable.
So have you spoken to any of those businesses to ask them what those factors might be?
I have not.
Okay. Well, there is a motion on the floor,
Been seconded
and it has been
Twice.
seconded
twice.
to move the legislation to the floor.
Yeah, let the full legislature act on it. I mean,
Well,
that's fine.
I just, out of respect for Mr. Touche, because I know he's worked real hard on this, we just have a difference of opinion. I would vote for this if we were gonna send it out without recommendation, but if we're looking at a favorable recommendation, I'll vote no at this time, but I still would like to see it voted for.
Mr. Touche, would you like to amend the recommendation, or would you like to go with the motion that's on the floor today?
Amend the original.
So send it over.
Okay, so we'll have to vote on that. My mistake procedurally, we have to vote on it, so.
I'd like to see the full legislature have the opportunity to vote on this.
Okay, so for clarity, the motion is to move this favorably, with a favorable recommendation to the legislature. Can I see a vote for?
I'll amend mine to get it to the floor this month, to move it out without recommendation.
So I
This way
second
Sean will
something.
vote for it.
I'll vote for
And
it.
this way we got.
The motion was already on the table.
Without Sean,
Yeah,
we
so
don't.
we have to vote on that.
It's already on the table.
All right, we're gonna vote on the first,
I withdrew it.
He withdrew it.
He's
He's
done withdrawn.
Yeah,
the author of it.
All right,
make the motion.
Now,
And then I'll
Mr.
second
Demullins
it.
has made a motion to move it neutrally, without recommendation. Okay, can I see a vote by a show of hands, all those in favor to move it without recommendation?
All right,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, the ayes have it. I will be against.
5 to 1.
Yes, sir.
Motion adjourned.
All right.
second.
All those in favor of adjourning?